It's okay. She's okay.
This week, on this episode, we are looking at a film picked by Kim. And Kim, you've decided to go with Takashi Miike's 2019 release, First Love. A director who I don't think we will ever cover on this show, mainly because the fact he has over 100 credits to his name as a director, and is probably one of the most prolific directors in Asian cinema. Even now, he's still absolutely churning out work, but at his height, he was working on 8 movies a year. Something that really puts his Western counterparts to absolute shame. At the same time, he's also one of the key directors of the revitalization of interest in the Asian cinema with his movie Audition, which, along with Battle Royale and Ring, really sparked that revival of interest and made people wonder what else they've been missing, which has only really continued as from that point on, as we've moved on from J-horror and extreme Asian cinema into just exploring pretty much any other format that can come out of Asia, with Miike continuously remaining a firm favourite, not only with the cult cinema fans, but also with more mainstream critics as well. With 2019's First Love, he continues his move into being a more mainstream filmmaker that we saw first of all with 13 Assassins, having left the outlaw period behind with what many would consider the cutoff point being his episode of Master of Horror Imprint, which had the distinguished honour of being banned during its initial run, only released all the episodes on the box set. The story itself, though, is, despite what the title may have you indicate, is not quite a love story as such. Miike himself admits that he chose to call the film First Love because it would make money. The film, though, follows a boxer who believes he's been diagnosed with a terminal brain tumour. At the same time, he, through a series of coincidental meetings, ends up being the defender and going on the run with a call girl and heroin addict who the local Yakuza believe has also made off with a bag full of drugs, and so leads into one crazy night as various parties attempt to get the drugs back, including a one-armed triad wielding a shotgun, a femme fatale with unrelenting determination to get her own way, and also a corrupt cop, just to name a few of the unique characters who pop up within this film. Now, Kim, Takashi Miike, are you a fan, or is he someone who's sort of like dipping in and out of?
I definitely would dip in and out of it. I mean, I haven't, over 100 movies. I think I've seen like 4. So I'm definitely like far behind in his movies. And the movies I've seen of his has really been, hit and miss. More hits than miss for me so far, because I think it was the movie before First Love that came out was Laplace's Witch, which was a absolute snore fest. I watched that at Fantasia Festival. I think it was one of like the most boring movies I watched at the festival ever, and it was like at like this 10 p.m. slot, so it was like after it was a pretty much, I had like a double feature snore fest, so I wasn't having a good night. But yeah, no, I mean, First Love is a complete opposite from, like the last movie I saw of his to this one. It's really, like turned up to like crazy. This is like, I love these one night things which go super fast paced and really just, has so much like, their plot really is like kind of like something deeper, and then there's like someone making a plan and then things go bad, and then there's all these quirky characters, and it seems very like Takashi Miike when he does that. So
yeah, I mean, when it comes to Miike, I mean, he's one of those directors who is in that very sort of rare group, along with likes of Quentin Tarantino, Oliver Stone, Spielberg, Kubrick, where he can basically just do what he wants. And I think when it comes to his work especially, I think a lot of people, because he spent so much time making these like extreme Asian cinema films, that anything now that he basically wants to put across, that he just has sort of free reign to do. And while he certainly seems to have mellowed in his sort of later years, perhaps because he ran out of things to shock and offend us with during the outlaw period, when you certainly look at films such as, like Dead or Alive and Ishii the Killer, and some of the things that he was absolutely shocking Western audiences with, and at the same time he was doing more sort of like subtle and almost like art house things with things like Audition, and then he obviously goes on and makes films like 13 Assassins, which is like one of the most fantastic samurai movies of recent years. And he's just a director, you never know what you're going to get until you actually start up one of his films. And I think with this film, it's probably one of his more accessible films. There's nothing overly weird. There's a lot of outlandish characters, but certainly in terms of the plotting, it's all pretty straightforward here. And might as well just start with obviously our two leads here. I mean, do we even like dare to call them sort of like a love interest? Because the connection that they have doesn't really seem like a romantic one as such.
If you look really hard at the last scene, they enter the apartment from afar and then they kiss at the door. So they are like a love. Like they do end up being in love. And it's because, and I would believe that it's each of their first love. Obviously, because the other one, like the girl has, her own story about this boy, but it's not so much a love story as, as we start seeing that it's a little bit, it's a little bit more than that.
Okay. Well, obviously we have Leo, who's a boxer. He's played by Masataka Kabuto. And he's really just this embodiment, of the traditional cinematic boxer. I mean, he's boxing against the great sadness in his life. So his only way to sort of fight the pain is by, putting himself in the ring and just beating the hell out of his opponents. And it's really during his last match where he sort of suffers what appears to be like a seizure. He gets knocked down and goes to have it checked out and discovers that he's got a brain tumor that's really going to kill him. And in turn, while this obviously fills him with like sadness, at the same time it fills him with this like ability to not fear death. He no longer fears it, which comes in quite handy, especially when he runs into Monica here, played by Sakurato Konishi. And she herself has got her own sort of problems in life. She was abandoned by her father and basically sold off to the local Yakuza as a call girl to pay off his gambling debts. In turn, she's been hooked on heroin and spends, the first 40 minutes of this film, nobody is having a good time, especially with these two characters, where they're basically being beaten up by their problems or by Yakuza. It doesn't seem to be a fun time for anyone, and especially with Monica. I mean, she's so hooked on heroin. She's pretty much in a complete world of her own, and it's really just this sort of chance encounter while she's on a assignment or a date. I don't know what the way to call a call girl appointment, but she's basically been sent out with this crooked cop who Leo believes is someone who's harassing her and manages to knock him out. Basically sending these two on the run. And at the same time, we should also note the fact that when Monica does heroin, she tends to have visions of her father, who, in typical Miike style, appears in his tidy whities and glasses, and basically just spends a lot of time chasing Monica around the film. So when we obviously look at these corrupt, villainous figures in our life, I mean, it's kind of hard to actually hate anyone. They're not particularly scummy, and they're not particularly the most villainous, because I think everyone's pretty much on the same sort of level when it comes to the being sort of like when you sort of rank up who's more evil than everyone else. There's no sort of like overwhelming big bad of this. It's just a group of bad guys that happen to have their passes crossed, and in true bad guy fashion, when you have rival bad guys cross, it ends in bloody violence. So
I wouldn't say that exactly. I mean, all of this was like this elaborate plan that just kind of went awry, right? I mean, that really just was a stupid person who didn't know what he was doing. And then it just got really, like, it just went way over his head. And, I mean, when you talk about, Leo and Monica before, I really think, they're kind of like the opposite of everyone. Because they're kind of like innocents. And I think in the beginning, Leo is it's not really that he fears death so much as that he's more of a character in the beginning that, when his conversation with his coach when he wins is one of the is probably like the part where you realize that he doesn't really have any passion for life. Like, he's not living his life. He's just kind of like dead inside. And I think getting that news of the tumor was more of a shock, because it kind of like suddenly made him think about living, what it is to live and what it is to fight for something that he cares about, I guess. And in this case, it just happened that he got annoyed and punched a cop to defend Monica, and then he gets dragged into this crazy mess, which, I mean, it's funny because he never really knows what's going on until, they all get kidnapped into this car with, the people who were first like putting together this plan. And that, obviously that was the corrupt cop and one of the Yakuza underlings that seemed to, Kase, I think his name is, that wants to, kind of rise up in the thing and kind of and like just do this whole thing where he takes drugs and earns some money out of it by releasing it through the cop. And it's more of the fact that this movie has just, I think it's really, what's entertaining about First Love is that it's like you said, the story itself is pretty straightforward in the sense that, it's a Yakuza who wants to double cross, and then the plans go awry, and then, civilians get caught in the mix, and then things just go crazy. And then it's just a fast-paced thing. Obviously, leading up to it, it's a bit more like padding up the story of, who's going to show up. Because there is an incredible amount of characters for this hour and 45 that we're going through. And it kind of like ends up making our two leads become rather small. Because all these other villainous characters kind of overlap them. And they have such bigger personalities than those two, who honestly, other than Monica's little hallucinations, which are get pretty funny after a while, it's really like this whole Yakuza and Triad fight that's what it builds up to in the end. And that's when, like the last 30 minutes is where, it's not a chase scene anymore. It's more of a really action fighting, all kinds of weapons, just all out.
Oh, definitely. It's really, I think this is the thing. The first 30 minutes or so is a bit of a slow burn, and then we get into the last part of the film, basically when the pair go on the run. And as I said, they're, through circumstances, they're tied up with a punk Yakuza and a corrupt cop, and basically the four of them find themselves caught in the midst of this gang war that's been sparked because we've got the local triads that are trying to move in on the Yakuza turf, and at the same time we got the old Yakuza boss there. Yeah, but
Kase kind of did it on himself. He was the one who was like, oh, he's gonna go and blame it on the Chinese because he wants to kind of like not let people look at him so much, right? So he was the one who sparked this drug war, and then in the end it just kind of goes really out of hand for him because he ends up with accidentally killing a bunch of people and then accidentally getting really high.
Yes, because true Miike fashion, his solution to treat a bullet wound is to rub heroin in it, which I have no idea how that works, but it's like.
But it's because it gets into your bloodstream. I watched another movie recently that did the same thing, and that's why I was like, I was so like, wow, why is this happening so quick? And I can't remember what that movie is anymore. But I remembered it, and the concept behind it was that it was because it went into your bloodstream, so it kind of like got him really high and got him like really like, I don't know, his true nature came out where he didn't care anymore whether he killed anybody. To him, it was kind of like he became kind of dead inside after a while.
It often surprises me is the things we learn about drugs in movies. Nobody knew that you could snort heroin until Pulp Fiction came out. And I remember people like going, oh yeah, the overdose scene is because she snorted heroin and you're supposed to inject heroin. It's like, no, you can't actually snort this, as any good drug counselor will tell you. And as I said, it amuses me the things that we do learn from movies like this. But it's so bizarre when we actually get into this whole sort of chase sequence, because it seems that Miike constantly keeps pulling these more outlandish characters out the bag. We've got a triad hit woman who's introduced basically lying on a sofa with a newspaper over her face, and then it's sort of like, oh, we got a job for you to do, and she just wakes up and goes at it. Like she's just been lying around waiting for this.
She's the girl that started out in the beginning at the Chinese restaurant. It all connects together because you never knew that the drunk girl at the Chinese restaurant turns out to be her, and she's part of the triad.
You see, I completely missed that. When I saw her being introduced, I just thought she was like
just
lying around waiting for a job to come along. So
no, because after that, when she sees Leo, she's like, oh, Pidan, and that's like because he was doing that job of like peeling those century eggs.
Yeah.
And that's why it was like the whole connection is that, you know, she's that girl, and they all like it all links together that she's kind of this like femme fatale assassin type of deal.
And then we got the other kick-ass female we got here is Julie, played by Becky.
Which... I have to say, she is one of my favorite characters because she's just so out there. Like every scene, you know, as she builds up to her crazy, it's just like. It's just so, like, incredible. Like, it's just like she comes out barefoot with a crowbar, or she just jumps out a window. She's, like, crazy. And it's crazy in such an entertaining way.
Oh, definitely so. And I just love the scene where she, like, first turns up with a crowbar. Because she's got this deranged look on her face. And then she starts, like, attacking the car with the crowbar. And then she's just, like, on the front of the front of the car. And they're like... It's like, we may be crazy, but we're not this crazy. And it's just the flow of these this sort of chase scene. We go in from that scene, and we got like we then go into like we end up at like the department store where, and we have like the garage fight, and the fact that Miike is in the way that only Miike can decides to randomly throw in an animated sequence for one scene as well.
I know.
It's like there's very... I think this again is the advantage of Miike being Miike, is the fact that he can just throw this randomness at the screen and just basically get away with it. But at the same time he's here, at least it feels like he's trying to talk to his audience and just basically going off on one of his weird tangents. As here he really constructs some interesting sort of action sequences. I mean, we've mentioned already, we've got the one-armed triad who's got a shotgun, which is just really cool to see. We've got swords fighting, we've got gunplay. As basically our two leads are hiding out in this department store waiting for the triads and Yakuza to wipe each other out so they can make their escape. And I think, I mean, when we have... when they actually do make their escape, we do unfortunately end on this sort of like 10 minutes or so, which just kind of sucky, as it feels that we have this perfect ending where, you know, spoiler, they escape and the Yakuza bosses are driving off into the sunset with this, basically every cop in the city, it seems, chasing after him, as we had that wonderful shot of like the bridge and him driving off into the sunset. That
overhead shot, that was really, really nice.
And for myself, that was like the perfect ending. And he's there obviously lamenting, you know, can someone who's wicked truly like lament for their evil deeds? And it's, you know, it's all very sort of poetic, but unfortunately we have this 10 minutes or so at the end which just really drags and just really took me out of the film when I was like so into the film and just wrapped up in the moment. And
I don't have too big of a problem with it. I think that it was meant to kind of like maybe give that First Love title a little bit more justice by giving these two a little bit more time and just showing that, you know, they're going to go back into their normal lives and find their normalcy, obviously, because, you know, now we come back and it's a bit of a parallel to the beginning because, you know, you see Leo, we zoom back into Leo's life as a boxer, and now he's training with a lot more, you know, vigor, a lot more enthusiasm, a lot more desire to win, and you see that difference. And where Monica, at the same time, she's not, you know, she's really trying to fight her drug addiction, and she's, you know, she finally gets to, you know, go home, and, you know, and they end up being together. So in some ways, it's not a bad ending. I think that, you know, the ending shot where, you know, they're at home and they're going back in, and then there's like that far away shot just watching them get inside, and then they kiss at the door, and then the door closes, and then you're just kind of like, well, that's a really good ending. That's really sweet, because, you know, you went through all this crazy stuff, and these two is really like most of the time they're just running, and then they're in the background, and then they just get like And then it's just like an exchange of, who are you? What am I doing? It's not her. She didn't do this, you know? It was kind of like this weird conversation where they don't know what's really going on, but then everybody thinks they know what's going on, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's kind of like, you know, it just mellows out where you give Monica the chance to kind of like, you know, meet this, also, you know, run into the boy that she keeps talking about, which Leo thinks she likes, but, you know, the story obviously is different because I think at some point she does talk about that, you know, it's really that he helped her through something. That's why in her mind, he's always in her mind.
Yeah.
But it's not like really like a love interest. So it's kind of like everything kind of like settles and everything kind of has this ending. But whether, you know, people like this whole ending where it's like, you know, tied up and just, you know, with a bow tie, right? Wrapped with a bow tie. And, you know, like, do we really need to do this, right? I do agree that, you know, if it was just a Yakuza boss driving away, I would have been fine with that also.
But you just need to have some sort of wrap up, really, just to know that if we're leaving these characters and they're going to be okay, because...
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because if it's just a boss that runs away, then all he did was leave these two sitting on, like, the, you know, hiding in a bush, right? How do you bring it back to them, right? Unless they did, like, that, and then they did a backtrack to the boss. But, like, how would you have done that? And you can't just be like, oh, I'm just gonna ditch my two leads and just leave them sitting in a bush somewhere running off, kind of thing, right?
I mean, you could add a little bit there. Yeah, certainly. I mean, just... I'm trying to think now how you could obviously end it. I mean, you just have something, you know, give it a Fight Club ending. Just say you met me at a very strange time in my life. Or why don't we go and get some coffee or something? And then you just had them wander off just this one crazy night, because we've obviously gone from the crazy night into the morning now, and everything sort of worked itself out, even though it's perhaps not in the most conventional way. I mean, we've got multiple characters who are dead or dying or being killed by police, or so essentially anyone who has potentially stood in the way of these characters sort of getting back to some sort of normal life is now been removed from the picture by one force or the other. So
right.
We essentially have given them a clean slate to start over, and unfortunately in this case Miike decides that, you know, we've got to reassure the audience that everything worked out alright, and then we can't just like leave it to the audience to interpret how they wanted.
I honestly think it was just to give a little bit of justice to the name, like the title that he chose. Like, sure, it's supposed to, you know, give you that, you know, it's supposed to be like supposed to, you know, get the big bucks and attract people to go see it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're watching a movie where there has nothing to do with your first love, then it becomes kind of like people are come out of this and be like, well, that was false advertising, you know? What was that title, you know? People can still argue about that all day.
Yeah. And then again, I wonder, like, people going to see a Miike movie, where they actually question things such as the title.
I would say so. I mean, he's very outlandish. There's a lot of like weird stuff, like weird content that he likes to adapt.
Yeah.
But still, you know, I mean, you wonder why it's called First Love, other than the fact that, you know, you can cash in some big bucks airing it on Valentine's Day, right?
Well, this was the thing. It had a single night showing on Valentine's Day. If you were lucky enough to live near a cinema that showed it, you could go and take your date or your significant other or whoever you're having a relationship with to go and see a Miike movie on Valentine's Day, which, let's face it, is going to be a more enjoyable time than if you go and see the rom-com. I think it's going to give you a lot more to talk about than, you know, if you see whatever Katherine Heigl or...
There's no more Katherine Heigl rom-coms.
Isn't there? I don't know. I don't watch rom-coms.
I don't think so. No. I haven't seen Katherine Heigl in anything now, but...
Well, she did it to herself when you start badmouthing the one good movie you made with Knocked Up, and people and start making like diva demands all the time. I think it's doesn't exactly warm you to people. So it's kind of like when Demi Moore was doing like striptease and stuff, and she was doing the reputation of "Gimme More."
But, I mean, going back to our thing about, watching movies on Valentine's Day. I mean, first love is a good medium, right? You either go, if you really want to go with a girl, a lot of people would go for the rom-coms. If not, big things in Valentine's Day is what either you watch a rom-com or you watch a horror movie. This one's a bloody Valentine Day, like there's a lot of action, fast pace, kind of meets in the middle.
I would say go to.
It's a fun movie. It's a fun movie, and I think that's all you need to think about is that Miike made a really fun movie.
Yeah, you say it like that, and you're surprised that Miike made a fun movie. And
well, I've only seen 5 movies,
okay.
and the previous movie I've seen of his, like I've mostly watched. I watched Audition, which was really weird horror, and then I watched obviously Extremes. I watched Box.
Oh yes, the Three Extremes.
Extremes, yeah. And then I watched. I don't remember what I watched in between, but then I watched Laplace's Witch, which was a snore fest.
Yeah.
So excuse me for feeling a little bit, excited about this one, which I was getting a little skeptical about.
I forget really because obviously we've, from my own personal movie watching background and stuff, I've been like following Miike since like Audition came out. And I think the problem with auditioning now is the fact that every scariest movie list has ruined the ending, and when the auditions are filmed best to watch blind. Because it lures you in with this like false sense of what you're going to get, and then it suddenly like pulls a rug out from beneath you, and that sort of final act is like, oh, this isn't good. And I think this is something that they're really quite from with what got Miike that sort of like initial attention, and we all started like. And saw like every distributor like rushing to bring across every other sort of thing he was doing that period, and you had things like the Dead or Alive trilogy, which is the first one in particular has one of the most graphic 5 minutes of cinema you will ever see. It's absolutely insane. And you, as I said, with like Isha the Killer is stupidly violent as well, and we'll perhaps talk about that on another day. But that's not a romantic movie at all. And then at the same time, he'll do things like Bad People in China or Rainy Dog, or more recently he's done things such as like For Love's Sake, which is like a romantic comedy musical, and he did like the adaptation of Ace Attorney. Yeah, which he's done
a few like anime and video game adaptations and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
so he definitely has like a lot of stuff. Like Laplace's Witch was also I think it was a novel or graphic novel or anime or a manga adaptation or something like that. I never read it, but I think when I did research, that's what it was. It was some kind of adaptation.
I just want to say one thing really in terms of like the action. Did you find it kind of refreshing to see like action scenes which weren't just like absolute frenzy of people like rushing each other with knives and knees and just having this sort of like raid style violence that we've seen carried across into films, like John Wick, where it's just like these intense action scenes where people are just like brutalizing each other.
Yeah, like this one really dials it down. Like it in a sense, it's most of the time it's 2 people fighting, and I think the max it had was like 4. But it's very like one person 1v1 a lot of times, and it's very like like structured around kind of like a boxing match, I guess. So you have people fighting the same thing. You have the boss fighting against one thing, and then you have that assassin versus the cop or something like that, and then you have obviously it's one person hits something, and then maybe something else will happen, and that person will attack the other person, and that it's kind of like a very I don't know, a flowing action. Okay,
so, I mean, does this inspire you to go and watch more Miike? I think is the most important question of the day, really. Because, I mean, you've obviously had a little bit of a sort of taste here, so...
Well, no, I have to, Miike movies are not easy to find, but, I mean, obviously, I've seen that, I obviously have Shudder now, and I see that Ichi the Killer is there. And I'm thinking about watching that one next. And slowly, I've always been interested. Like, I try to, like, obviously the effort was there when I wanted to go see Laplace's Witch, and that just kind of blew up in my face. But, I try to see more. I mean, I'm really trying to get a chance to watch Ace Attorney since I heard it's really good, and I'm a big fan of the video games. So that's one of the ones that I'm really looking forward to watching, and it's always been on like my watch list. I just never got around to watching it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a very sort of straightforward adaptation of the video games, and it's fun when you have like the courtroom sequences and you have like verdict flash across in like big letters like in the video games. So it's fun in that respect, in the fact that he adapts like cases from like the first game, I think it is. So
yeah,
it's definitely good in that respect. One I would recommend that you check out, and I think it's on Shudder as well, and that'd be The Happiness of the Katamoris. It's kind of like Sound of Music, but with zombies. As this family set up a guest house, and all the guests die, so they go and bury them in the woods, only for them to come back as zombies. But it's got musical numbers in it, and it's kind of bonkers. But it's it's not too heavy at the same time.
Okay, well, I mean, after watching, Anna and the Apocalypse, I'm all for, like, zombies and musicals right now. So, I'm definitely okay with that, yeah. No, I mean, I have a few on my list. Like, I think 13 Assassins might have been on there. I can't remember. And then maybe Blade of the Immortal I saw somewhere also. I'm sure, like, it's all over the place. It's just, the effort to go find it in our crazy roster of movies that happen to be sitting around, right?
And I know what you mean, and certainly when it comes to Miike, I mean, there's no... just because it's very hard to say, like, because he makes so many movies, it's hard to even to say, like, oh, this was his good period of filmmaking, because he can produce absolutely fantastic work, and at the same time he can produce really weird work, and then he can just produce like really kind of tedious work. So you kind of... the good thing about Letterboxd and stuff is the fact that at least you get an idea of what you're getting into, or just like what the good ones to hunt down are. I mean, Sukiyaki Western Django is a fun take on the Eastern Western and features Quentin Tarantino in a interesting cameo role. I mean, he did he did Yataman, which is a Tetsubara adaptation. He's a superhero movie, which is pretty fun. 13 Assassins is really fantastic, and I think For Love's Sake as well, I think you'd also like, being this it's a musical romance film.
It's gonna be all on my list. I don't know right now. It really depends what I have access to, and then like where I have time to watch it right now. So I just don't know. It's always like it's all turning into some odd, indecisive movie viewing right now.
I know what you mean. I mean, it's funny when you say that, it's what is available, because I forget that obviously in Canada, I assume that Canada's like got access to more things than we do, being that you guys are on Region 1.
Yeah, on one hand, right? And then on the other hand, not really. We have a lot of stuff that's like comes out like a year after on Netflix than everybody else, and it's a give and take. Like, you might get things that I don't get right away, and then I might get things like after or earlier. Or it's all balanced out. It's all a bunch of like, especially because I'm in Quebec, there's even more like rules and regulations that stop things from getting here. And just take like one of my best examples I have is the fact that the zombie movie Ravenous is a Quebec movie. It's a French-Canadian movie. And it ended up landing on Netflix in the US first, and not in Canada. We got it like a year after. It was because of rules and regulations we couldn't get it right away, I think. So, hey, it's just, my backyard. It was filmed in literally my backyard, kind of thing. And we didn't even US got it before us, so... What can I say?
It's funny when you start like looking at what the delays of things. I mean, America got Battle Royale 5 years after ourselves. Same with All the Boys Love Mandy Lane, and we got Snowpiercer about the same amount of time after it was released. It just used to constantly amuse my American friends the fact that we still hadn't got Snowpiercer. It had like one showing at the Edinburgh Film Festival, and then it was never seen again until Netflix brought it over last year. So
that's that. Takashi Miike. We can throw it out to the people who are listening to this. What have you seen? Have you seen First Love? That sort of stuff. What's your favorite Takashi Miike film? Yeah, how many have they checked off out of 104 credits?
I don't think anyone's seen all 104. I don't think even Tom Mez has seen all 104 of them. And he wrote like the quintessential book on Miike Agitator. If there's anyone you want to really talk about with Miike with, he's the guy. Him, that and Tsukamoto. He's really keyed up on Tsukamoto, who's another weird out there director. He's the person responsible for giving us the sort of Japanese cyberpunk movement with like the Tetsuo movies, which in turn inspired a whole bunch of American cyberpunk movies based on the Japanese style, which were just bloody awful. But I mean, if you like Miike movies, I would definitely recommend also checking out the work of Sion Sono. In many ways, he picked up where Miike left off with the Outlaw period and just done increasingly like bizarre works, things like Suicide Club and Why Don't You Play in Hell. Why Don't You Play in Hell in particular, I would think could pair really well with this film. So.
Oh well, talking about pairing, what's some of your further viewing?
Well, the first one, we obviously have the hardware sort of showdown. It made me instantly think of The Equalizer, the Denzel Washington version, because that also has a showdown in the hardware store.
Okay, I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen the second one, but the first one's good, and it kind of works to Denzel Washington's usual role of I'm blank role, but also the smartest person in the room, which seems to be all his roles. He's like, I'm a train driver, but I'm the smartest train driver in the world, or I'm a pilot, but the smartest pilot in the world is, which is a little annoying, but sometimes it works, and The Equalizer's one that it works for. In terms of lovers in really lessons, great situations, I'd also recommend checking out True Romance by Tony Scott and featuring a script by Quentin Tarantino. Also featuring Rosario Dawson as the quintessential manic pixie dream girl, as she's a former call girl who hooks up with a comic book store worker, and they basically go on a run and end up getting caught up in a huge drug deal shootout, it's a really fun movie. And I mean, it's a romantic movie written by Tarantino, which really should tell you all you need to know about that one. But it also argued the fact that the first 3 Street Fighter movies are the best deep movies, and gave us this like impossible fantasy for a lot of film junkies, where you're in the cinema seeing your triple feature and you have the hot girl spill popcorn on you, and that you form this amazing connection. You get to go for pie and coffee, and many of us are still waiting for that to happen. But in terms of like Asian cinema, I mean, Sion Sono, I would say, is a really fantastic director to always pair with Miike's work. And Why Don't You Play in Hell in particular, I'd say, is a really great movie to pair with this one. It's a lot of fun, and if you wanted like a hip-hop musical, Tokyo Tribe's also pretty cool as well. So
nice.
Yeah, there's a few picks for you. But what about yourself, Kim?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, I'm gonna right away, because this one is led by, one of our main leads is Kubota, who plays Leo. And I'm going to pair one of his other 2019 movie, Diner. Which, if it was more available, I would have chosen this movie as a After Hours. We still have time. It might arrive at some time. But yeah, so Kubota in this one actually plays a completely opposite character from Leo, actually. Where he plays, the diner is pretty much like this diner for assassins. And Kubota plays this, assassin who's just covered in scars, and he has super weird kind of he just feels very deadly, very emo, very deadly, very that sort of thing. And he's just downright wild. He has these crazy action scenes. So anyways, that's a really good one to pair with this one as like what's it Masataka Kubota double feature kind of deal. If we go back into, like Hollywood and such, I thought right away, Innocence getting into things over their heads was something like Date Night. 2010's Date Night with Steve Carell and Tina Fey, which is, very comical. I personally really like the movie. I think it's like really downright, like over the top ridiculous. But it's so much fun, and it has that kind of like, getting caught in a situation that you didn't really want to be in. But other than that, I mean, if you think about, something like this, which is like going on a day of just crazy and being caught up in a situation, the first movie that popped into my head was 2015's Mr. Right.
Yes, yeah, no, I remember which one you talk about. Yep.
Yeah, the one with
Ferris and
the one with with Anna Kendrick and Sam Rockwell. Yeah, it's like, both of them are equally like, it has about the same amount of quirk, the same amount of action, and it really, I personally find it really fun. I know all these movies in general, if you looked at Rotten Tomatoes, it's scored
Who listens
really
to Rotten
badly,
Tomatoes, though?
but
it's the worst site in the world. If you're gonna get a proper reaction, go Letterboxd like normal people. Don't trust Rotten Tomatoes for like anything.
So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many people are trust Rotten Tomatoes, but I'm just saying on Rotten Tomatoes, both of these, like Date Night and Mr. Right, has fairly low ratings, and I don't think Diner has any ratings because it didn't really get anywhere. It was still doing the festival route last I checked. So, so those are my further viewing picks.
Well, that brings us to the end to another edition of Moves and Tea, After Hours edition. Thank you as always for listening. If you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button. And you can also follow us on both Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. You can also check out our blog, which is moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com, where you can find our complete archive for looking back at our all 4 seasons that we've done to date, as well as our After Hours specials, the Shark Weeks, and also other bits of fun writing that we've done as well. So definitely check all that out. Next episode is my pick for the After Hours, and we're going to be looking at the new rising genre, which is pastel goth, as we check out Paradise Hills. So I hope you can join us, but until then, thank you as always for listening, and thank you to my co-host Kim, and we'll be back next time discussing Paradise Hills. But until then, good night.